Part 42, An Enticing Offer. Suma's POV, Jake yelled as his spell activated. I had already moved from between him and the dummy, and I was soon extremely glad to have done it. His spell was strange. I could feel some magical energy building up, but it was not very much. Certainty not enough to destroy such a large enemy. A glowing path of light appeared and connected Jake and the center of the dummy. For a moment I expected some kind of fire spell, but I did not actually see the attack. Before I had time to realize what happened, the training dummy exploded violently into thousands of pieces. A roar like thunder shot through the air, and the blue path vanished. It startled me so much I lost my concentration and nearly stopped flapping my wings. There was literally only scraps and splinters left of the dummy. "Stop! Stop!" the instructor ordered. I landed on Jake's shoulder as the instructor yelled for us to get back to the group. "What were you thinking?" the instructor yelled. "You used tactical scale magic in a training session while on a training field." We were being chastised for Jake's attack spell. I think he called it railgun. "You annihilated a training dummy. I don't even know how that was possible. It was made of metal." "Sir, I apologize. I didn't realize," Jake started to say, but the instructor did not let him finish. "Enough, Cadet Suma. He is your familiar, so this is your responsibility," he declared. "I think that will be enough, Sergeant," Anim said as he landed on a perch next to the instructor. He was shorter than the instructor and darker in color, but obviously he outranked the instructor. Members of the King's Armed Forces, once they have graduated from basic training anyway, all wear gold symbols on their chest to display their status. For a private just out of training, the symbol is a single golden line worn horizontally. For the next two ranks, an extra line is added above the first. This Neem was a major, which I knew because he wore 3 upside-down triangles on his chest, where the instructor only had a single square. "Major!" the instructor said and stood straight up on his perch, his feathers slightly raised from surprise. "Sir, I apologize for my inability to properly control and discipline my cadets," he said. "No need for that, Sergeant, at least not yet," the major said and turned to face Jake and I. "So, which one of you was it that cast the tactical magic? I thought I heard that the familiar was the caster, but I could have been mistaken. Or at least that is what my common sense wants me to believe." "It was me, sir," Jake said. He was stood stock still, and even straighter than the drill instructor. His arms were behind his back, and one of his appendages was wrapped tightly around the other. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize my spell would be so powerful," Jake explained. I admit when I first noticed Jake's spell, I was convinced it was not going to be enough, or at least nothing special. It used so little mana after all, I still do not understand how a spell so weak could have produced such an effect. "What is your name, if you possess one?" the major asked. Strangely, he seemed unfazed by Jake's ability to speak. So far, most Neem we have encountered have been caught off guard by it. Having a familiar with the ability to speak is almost unheard of, outside of children's stories anyway. So the major's ability to take it in stride was fairly impressive. "That is a complicated answer, sir," I told the major. "Simplify it," he said plainly. "Jake, this is an exceedingly high-ranked major," I said to Jake over our private connection. "We should use your familiar name. That is the proper protocol." Jake agreed. "My name is Sentinel," Jake told the major. "Well, Sentinel, who was it that taught you tactical magic?" the major wondered. Actually, this was something I had not thought of. I just accepted it on account of how powerful Jake is, but who did teach him that spell? It certainly was not me. Only the highest levels of mages are even allowed to attempt to learn it. "I created the spell myself, sir, but it was based on knowledge from my world," Jake explained. "I had figured that would be the case, that it was something from his world, but I did not expect him to be able to actually develop the spell alone. Most tactical magic requires teams of Neem from all occupations working in tandem for months or years to create a new tactical spell." "You and who else?" the major asked, obviously not believing Jake did it alone. "No one, sir. I did it alone," Jake told him. The major seemed irritated, whether by Jake's answer or by the thought that a single person could create tactical magic all by himself. I could not tell. "Do you expect me to believe that a single familiar was able to develop, test, and successfully utilize tactical magic all by himself?" the major asked in a quite serious tone, his feathers pressed closely to his body. "It's the truth, sir," Jake responded. There were a few long moments of quiet while the major stared at Jake. Sentinel, follow me. He turned to the instructor. Sergeant, continue your class. Now, I assume you are this familiar's master, he asked me. Yes, sir, I said. Please follow me as well. The major then spread his wings and took flight. I followed him, and Jake walked after us quickly. We landed beside a large wyvern who had a narrow saddle on its back between its wings. We were perched on a few molded vines, and when Jake arrived, he opted to sit on the grass. I do not know how he was comfortable like that, though. His limbs were twisted and interlocked, or crisscross applesauce, as he once called it. Sentinel, how would you feel about joining the Drake Brigade? The major asked. Jake's POV. I sat on my bed that night, thinking about my earlier conversation with the major. He said, You and Madam Suma would be excellent candidates for our program. You have unparalleled magical prowess, the ability to cast tactical-grade magic without anyone assisting you, and you, Madam Suma, you are an excellent healing mage. We are always on the lookout for those, especially ones with names. I'm sorry, sir, who exactly are the Drakes? I asked. I have only heard rumors myself. I did not believe they actually existed, Suma said in awe at the realization. What rumors have you heard, Madam Suma? The major asked, interested. It might have been his first opportunity to get an outsider's perspective on his team, or maybe he just liked hearing what people thought of them. That they are some kind of special team of mages, each with powerful and unique familiars. They go on the kinds of missions most people do not survive. I have heard their power and effectiveness, not to mention their magical strength, is likened to the descendants of the dragons, Suma told us. A well-earned reputation, I assure you, the major said pridefully. And I want you two to try out for the team. That conversation was nearly 4 hours ago, and it's still bouncing around my head. He explained to us that there would be a kind of tryout held in 12 days. Any member of the Army, new recruit or otherwise, was allowed to try out, but if we did succeed, we would still need to pass boot camp to actually be accepted. Suma and I talked about it and told the major we would have an answer for him in 2 days. We both needed time to think about the offer. My train of thought was interrupted by the ringing of my phone. My mom has started calling me every night now that I'm spending more time on Earth. Hello? I answered. Hey, Jake. I just wanted to call and make sure you were okay. You didn't answer your phone last night and I got worried, Mom said, sounding relieved that I had picked up. I'm fine, Mom. I couldn't leave Suma's world last night because they got themselves into a pickle and needed someone to help them out. I ended up camping on a mountain because of it last night. I explained the whole series of events to her, only leaving out the part where I got bitten by a giant ant reptile thing and paralyzed. Well, I'm just happy that that cave didn't collapse on you or something. They really should have thought their plan through better than that. I thought you said they were trained professionals, Jake. She complained. Well, trained for healing, not cave exploration, I said, but they did okay for their first time. Suma's POV I laid in my roost, under the Army-issue tarp that blocked out some of the light from the stupidly bright magical laces running through the floors and ceiling of the underground sleeping area. The conversation Jake and I had with the major would not leave my thoughts. He wanted us, or more realistically, Jake, as a part of his Drake's team. I am no fool. I know I was only offered because Jake is my familiar and they cannot only offer it to him, but that did not mean it was not going to affect me. I would have to go on missions with Jake, as I am the only one capable of summoning him. So that means I would end up going on quite dangerous missions to places where I could be killed without even knowing what was happening. I signed up to be a healing mage. I expected to be put into dangerous places, doing dangerous things, but I never once considered I would end up on the front lines. The thought was frightening, but another part of me said something different. A small part of me wanted to go, wanted to be a part of something bigger, wanted to do something that would make a difference in this war. I fell asleep thinking about my feelings, and about how my life would change if I acted on those feelings. Loritz Isbala's POV. After the major flew away from the training area with the one call Suma and her Viking, the rest of the cadets finished one by one their combat maneuvers. We were dismissed for a brief time so that we could eat, and during my lunch break the major approached and made me an offer. He wanted me to join his team, or rather, he wanted me to audition for it. He called them the Drakes. I had heard of the team before. My father mentioned them on several occasions while in business dealings with other nobles. I had always made it a point to attend those meetings so as to further my understanding of the country and its laws. I accepted the major's offer without a second thought. I joined the army in order to serve. This was just a better way of doing so. I had 12 days to prepare myself and my familiar for the tryout. Of course, this raised an issue. When he pulled Suma and the Viking aside, he most likely offered them a chance to audition as well. And why would he not? Even I must admit I did not expect to see tactical-level magic to be utilized during a training session, and by a single familiar no less. What a troublesome duo, I mumbled as I grew my lunch. Jake's POV. It was time. Suma and I had discussed it before today. I sat in the therapist's office building waiting to be called back for my appointment. I had let her know that I was bringing Suma to see her, but obviously that was a small lie. Suma was still having issues with what happened that day in the alley, and I figured that the stress from our upcoming decision might be a lot for her to handle, so I talked to her and she agreed. We would be summoning the doctor to see her. "Jake, the doctor is ready for you," the receptionist announced. "Thank you," I said, and walked to her office. We had had several meetings since that first time after the attack in the alley, so I didn't need to be led to her office anymore. I knocked on the door and walked in. "Hey, Dr. Maxwell," I said. "Hello, Jake. How have you been?" she asked, smiling. "I've been good. Been getting lots of exercise and stuff," I told her and sat on the couch. I had been preparing for this for a while now, planning what I was going to say and how to say it. "So, what's new?" she asked and took a seat in the chair opposite of me. "Well, actually, do you remember my friend I told you about? The one who was with me in the alley? Suma?" I asked. "I do," she said. "Why?" "She wants to talk to you. She has been dealing with a lot of stress lately, and recently she and I were both offered a pretty major decision that we need to make. I thought it would be a good idea for her to talk with a professional about it, so I reminded her of your offer." I explained. "Ah, well, I'm happy to see her whenever she needs," Dr. Maxwell said. "That's great, because she wants to see you now," I said. This was the part I was dreading. This was the part that would make me look crazy. "Like right now? Is she here?" the doctor wondered. "In a manner of speaking, yes." I took a deep breath and began my pre-rehearsed speech. "Okay, so this is going to make me sound crazy, but in order for you to see her, we need to hold hands for a few seconds. Suma is actually a magic user from another world, and she is also a tiny bird person from a race called Neem. In order to get to her, we hold hands, then I will contact her, and she will summon me. Then we will be transported to her world. From there, she will induce a mind link and show you some of her memories, and that will allow you to understand her." I gasped deeply to regain my breath after that long explanation and waited for her response. After a few moments of silence, she finally answered, "Okay." I was stunned. I couldn't believe it was that easy. You believe me?" I asked, doubtful. "No, but I do believe that letting you try will help break your delusion, and then we can treat the underlying problem. Honestly, I can't believe I didn't realize how precarious your mental state was. So if letting you hold my hand for a moment is what it is going to take for you to start healing, then I am willing to entertain you for a few moments," she said. Honestly, I couldn't blame her, but at least she would let me try. "Thank you," I said. "Suma, you can summon us now," I announced after I held the doctor's hand. "Now, Doc, don't freak out when your arms and legs start to vanish, okay?" "Oh, I won't," she reassured me. A second later, her feet had already been fully transported, and so had the top of her head. She looked horrified, probably because she was seeing it happen to me, just as I was watching it happen to her. Needless to say, she panicked. Suma's POV. "Suma, you can summon us now," Jake announced. I had only been waiting on his signal for a short time, but it felt like ages. I immediately began the summoning, and as soon as it was completed and they arrived, my ears were filled with the sounds of distressed shrieking. I could not understand what the person was saying, but they seemed upset. Jake tried hard to calm the woman down, though. "I told you what would happen." The woman gave some kind of response, a rather loud one at that. "Yes, but you can't say I lied or that I didn't make it clear." There was a moment of silence as the two stared at one another. "So, this is Suma," Jake said, gesturing at me. "Hello," I greeted, but then remembered she would not be able to understand me either yet. I went ahead and started sharing my memories so that we would be able to understand each other. She seemed surprised and began saying something again. I told you, remember, she would share some memories so that you would be able to understand her language. Don't worry, it doesn't hurt. Jake tried to reassure her. It seemed to help, however slightly. Done, I said. I had showed her all the way up to just after I was released from the interrogation room. That way she would understand how everything happened. Jake had suggested the idea. That bird talks. Part 43. A Quiet Night. It sounds like you've been through a lot. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about it all? The therapist, Dr. Maxwell, asked. After she had calmed down and understood what was happening, she seemed eager to talk to me and help if she could. She was sitting on a pillar of vines Jake had made for her before giving us some privacy and outside for a while. I suppose the first thing that I think of is what happened in... No, that is not true. The first thing I think of is my parents, I said. Your parents? Can you tell me a bit about them? In what context? However you want. I thought about her request for a moment. Well, my mom is protective. When I told her I volunteered for the military, she became quite upset. My dad has always been distant, but that is normal, I suppose. Normal? Dr. Maxwell asked. How so? Well, fathers rarely have anything to do with their children. Is that normal on your world? She wondered. Oh, yes, but my family has never really been normal. In what way? Well, most Neem are raised by only a single parent, usually the mother. It is a rare occurrence for the father to be involved in any significant way. I see. She nodded that she understood. And how do you feel about that? Or, more specifically, how do you feel about your father? I love him. He has been with me my entire life, but our relationship has always been strained, I explained. And why do you think that is? I do not know, really. Maybe it is because we are too different or too similar. Suma, I have a question. Yes? After your attack, what did your parents do? Dr. Maxwell asked softly. They did not come see me for a while. They disappeared from my life for nearly a week. When I asked them why, I could feel my heartbeat increasing as I spoke. I was getting frustrated just thinking about it. When I asked them why, they said it was because they were afraid. Afraid? She sounded confused. Afraid of what? Of you? No, afraid of Jake. Jake, who had protected me, who has stayed with me without leaving my side for even a moment. Jake, who comforted me when I thought I had been responsible for killing someone, even though he himself was also suffering in the same way. And they were afraid of him. Jake's POV. I walked around in Suma's training camp while she talked to Dr. Maxwell. It was surprisingly large, not in height, but rather it was all spread out. I guess that made sense, though, seeing as all the Neem could fly. I heard voices in the distance, both of which sounded familiar. Walking towards them, I saw Vindicta and Von Pak perched outside of a tent made of dirt that connected to a large earthen dome. Hey, you two, I announced. Oh, hello, Jake, Vindicta said. Greetings, Jake, Von Pak said, but he sounded a bit less enthusiastic. What are you doing here? Training ended hours ago. I would have assumed you would have gone home by now. Yeah, but Suma needed me for something, so I came back for a bit, I said. And where is Suma? Normally, you two are all but inseparable while in camp, Vindicta pointed out. She is talking to a friend. I'm giving them a few minutes alone. Why not just send you back then? Surely you would rather be in your world than ours, especially if you were limited to a single training camp, Von Pak questioned. That's a long story, but the short and sweet of it is it's safer if I stay here while they talk. They seemed confused, but didn't press the issue. Instead, I asked them a question. So, what are you two doing outside alone at sundown? I teased. Oh, nothing. We were just talking, Vindicta nearly yelled. I smiled at Von Pak, who avoided my gaze. Well, I'm going to go explore the camp a bit. I almost never see anything other than the training area after all. See you two later, I said, and beat a hasty retreat from the two embarrassed nymphs. I continued looking around the camp and saw another Neem sitting outside another dome. It was the same one from the other day's training. Hi, I called out. He looked around confused until he eventually saw me. "You're Lorik, right? I didn't get to finish as he immediately spread his wings and flew away. "I'm kinda offended." Wow. Part 44. Irritations. "Mori," I said in an attempt to summon my sword. I was back home now that Suma had finished her talk with Dr. Maxwell, at least for today. "Twilight," I tried again. I could feel something happening, but it was like I was pushing my spells through a wall of frozen pudding. I knew it could be done. I did it in the alley that time I got attacked, but I hadn't been able to recreate it since. "Destiny?" I repeated, starting to get frustrated. Performing any kind of summons without the life or death factor was practically impossible, and casting a real spell was almost as hard. So far, the most magic I have been able to do on Earth was create a single drop of water and some sparkly glitter like a fairy sneezed or something. Still, that's better than I could manage a few months ago. "Mr. Vandal?" The voice of my landlord called from outside my apartment. I walked over and opened the door. "Yes?" I asked. "Mr. Vandal, your rent has come due, actually. It was due a long time ago. This is your final notice. You have until the end of the week to pay this month's rent and last month's, or you will be evicted," she declared. "What? How is that possible? I have my rent set to an auto payment with my bank. This isn't right," I stated confused. "Well then, you may want to call your bank because I haven't received payment in 2 months," she stated firmly. "You have 7 days, Mr. Vandal." She turned and walked away. "Wait, could I pay with something other than my bank?" I asked with an idea. She stopped. "I don't do trades, sir." "Not a trade. Just, could I pay with cash or something just until I get my bank sorted out?" I wondered. "I could accept cash, but you would need to pay a notary public and have a one-time alternate payment contract written up, just in case whatever you pay with ends up being counterfeit." She explained. "I have the contracts, you pay the notary, that's how it works." "Deal. I have the money right now if you have the contracts," I said. "I'll need to print them out. I have the notary on retainer. You can pay her when she arrives." With that, she left and I went back into my apartment. Specifically, I went to a safe I had hidden under my bed. Inside was a few legal documents, a copy of my birth certificate, and 27 gold coins I got from Suma's World. I put most of them into my bank, but kept a few just in case. I looked up the value of gold per ounce, then weighed each coin. At 1,500 pounds per ounce and 4 ounces per coin, just a single coin would cover all my due rent, as well as the next 4 months. I then opened my phone and pulled my bank statements up. There did seem to be some kind of hold on a few of my last payments. My bank wasn't open 24 hours a day, so I would just have to call tomorrow. I checked the total amount in my account, and it was just what I expected it to be. 120,000 pounds. My talk with Dr. Maxwell ended, but I could not clear my mind. I looked around at all the other recruits, most already asleep in their alcoves, and decided I wanted to stretch my wings for a bit. I quietly left the sleeping roost and went outside. Flying at night was an abnormal experience for me. Before this, I had only done it on 2 or 3 occasions, and definitely never over a military training base. The cool air rushing down my wings felt relaxing, and the full moon provided enough light to find my way. After a while, I noticed someone else flying too. I drew closer and saw it was Lorik Isbala, the neem with the black serpent familiar. "Hello there," I said as I drifted beside him. "Greetings," he said plainly. "Did you come out to enjoy the cool air as well?" I asked him. "Yes," he responded flatly. "So, is it as nice as you thought?" I asked awkwardly. Honestly, I was terrible at normal conversations. I'm always too nervous. "Madam Suma, please allow me to be clear. I do not dislike you." He ignored my floundering and stated, "Well, that is good. I do not dislike you either. But we are rivals. Both of us will be competing for the position that has opened up for the Drake Brigade. How did you... Listen, about being rivals, I'm not even certain I am going to accept the Major's offer." I tried to explain. Lorik sighed. "I cannot say I am surprised." His voice was irritated, annoyed even. "And why is that?" I questioned. "Madam Suma, your sense of reason is skewed, at least if the company you keep is anything to go by." "That is not fair. You do not even know Jake. He is a Viking, is he not?" Lorik interrupted. "No," I denied. No, he is not, despite what the rumors may say. Please do not bother trying to lie to me, Madam Suma. I have seen the old rune stills. I know that he is. I know what he is. Things are more complicated than you realize, I said. Perhaps, but is any situation complicated enough to warrant having a Viking familiar? You may as well have the Chaos Dragon himself. What those monsters did, they should all be exterminated. That is not fair. You do not even know Jake. He is a good person and strong, I tried to explain. Strong indeed. Tell me, how did someone like you manage to dominate the mind of a Viking? He asked. Someone like me? You mean how did a lowly commoner dominate a Viking? I accused. I do not care about your lineage, Madam Suma. I meant how did a fifth-level mage who has never had a familiar before manage to dominate such a creature? I think this conversation is done, I stated, folded my wings, and dived down and turned back to camp. I had my fill of the cold that night. Part 45. Obstacles. Jake's POV. I felt like I was trudging through mud, probably because I actually was. I tripped on something and fell forwards, face-planting the ground and getting covered in filth. I looked to my left and right. The others were having a tough time, too. You might be thinking I'm talking about the Neem, but I'm not. I'm talking about other familiars. We were all undergoing a test of sorts without our summoners. We were all given a single direction to reach the other end of the obstacle course and back. Our task was to find and retrieve a specific object. The purpose of the test was to rate our capabilities so our summoners would better understand our limits. At least, that's what I was told by Suma. I wasn't actually present when everything was being explained. They thought that since I was intelligent, that I shouldn't be present during the explanation just in case I figured out a quick way around the problems. Suma, I said, after wiping some mud from my forehead and cheek, how much further does this mud pit go on? We were talking our private connection since we were so far apart. Not much longer, Jake. You are nearly at the end, she said. Suma was flying over the course giving me directions. Do you see that tree? The one with the red leaves? Yes, I said, approaching it. Okay, good. Make sure you do not go near it. I stopped. Why? That looks like a dragon's blood tree. They are dangerous, but it is difficult to tell from up here. I went around the tree carefully. Good thing, too, because another familiar, a borog, charged straight through its low-hanging vines and, well, I'll leave out the gory details. But suffice it to say, the aftermath was gruesome. I soon came upon a set of 3 long, narrow hallways that led underground. Suma, any idea which way I should go? I am sorry, Jake. I cannot tell which of the paths is connected to which exit. Okay, I'm right-handed, so I'll go right. I ducked down to avoid some low-hanging roots from a small tree growing above the entrance of the underground hallway. The corridor itself was dark, damp, smelled of mold, and only got worse the deeper I went in. The single saving grace was that it looked built and not natural, so I was fairly certain I wasn't going to end up in another situation like the cave on Dragon's Hoard. Suma, I'm telling you right now, if at any point I have to crawl on my belly to fit through a narrow tunnel, I'm quitting this stupid training. I joked, half-joked. I created a ball of fire for light, something I was getting much better at, and tossed a separate fireball down the tunnel to see what was ahead. As the blue flames illuminated the path, I saw collapsed areas of walls and ceilings, roots that had grown through the tunnel and hung from the top, and something very surprising. I saw concrete. It was the first time since arriving in Suma's world all those years ago I had seen stonework that wasn't simply the molding or manipulation of existing rock. Suma, what is this place? What do you mean, Jake? She asked. Were these training grounds built on something? I wondered as I approached the concrete. Getting closer, I could see it was the remains of a wall. It stood out as unnatural compared to the interwoven vines and dirt that made up the rest of the hallway. I do not know. Why? She wondered, sounding confused. I picked up a bit of the concrete and flipped it over after noticing some black markings on the side. The bottom, or rather I suppose top, of the decayed wall had runes on it. The runes themselves were in varying states of ruin as well. Most of them were completely smeared off or cracked completely in half from the splitting of the concrete itself. I found runes down here and concrete too, I told her. Runes? She said, surprised. What would runes be doing down there? Well, your people use runes a lot, right? Maybe this was a battleground at one point? Really, the concrete being here is more surprising to me, I said and put a few of the broken bits of rune-covered rock into my backpack. I figured I could just show Suma later, and maybe she would know more if she actually saw it, or she could ask someone who knew. I left the hallway a few minutes later and was relieved to be out in the sun again. Well, actually, it was overcast, but it was still better than being in a cave again. I see you now, Jake. You came out of the middle exit. You are not far now, she said. Turn left and walk forwards to the stream. When you reach it, follow it until I tell you to stop. I followed her instructions and eventually came to a little creek flowing downhill. However, for some reason, the water was a dull green. Great! You are at the stream. Now just keep walking and do not cross it until I say okay. She told me. Why not? I wondered. It is not safe to cross it yet. If you were to fall in, then it could be deadly, she explained seriously. Jake, please do not try to cross it, Suma said urgently. I wasn't going to. I was just curious. I clarified, then began walking downstream like she instructed. I do not know all the details, but I have heard rumors of Neem who just landed in the water to rest dying horrible deaths in just a few hours. I guess that explains why I don't see any fish in the water, I noticed. Not anymore, no. Though I am told there used to be. Wait, so does that mean the water wasn't always deadly? Yes, in fact, I think that only started a few years before I was hatched. As I was walking, I opened my bag and started scrounging around for some kind of empty, resealable container. I wanted to take a sample of the water back to Earth with me and see if I could figure out what it was, but I didn't have anything usable. Just as I slung my backpack back over my shoulder, I saw what looked like some kind of dam made of sand, stone, mud, broken tree branches, and other assorted things that must have fallen into the stream. On one side, the water flowing into the dam was green, but on the other, it looked almost normal again. Okay, Jake, you can cross along that water stop. Suma's POV. I watched Jake carefully walk across the water stop. To me, it seemed quite large, but when compared to Jake, it seemed almost silly to describe it in such a way. In reality, Jake probably could have jumped across the length of the river, but it seemed too dangerous, so I led him to the nearest safe place I could see from my perch on the guiding tower. The guiding towers were the place all the masters were supposed to perch while guiding their familiars. There were 3 currently set up around the training ground. We were instructed that while we could give commands to the familiars while in the air, if we were to land anywhere other than a guiding tower, we would be failed automatically. Okay, Suma, which way now? Jake asked after he crossed the stream. I refocused my attention to him and began looking for a safe path from where he was to the end of the course. Do you see that large rock next to the trees with blue leaves? I asked. Yes. Go there, then wait. I need to readjust to a better tower. I took flight and went to the nearest tower opposite to where Jake was now. I needed a clearer view of his location and what he was walking into. After a moment, I was perched on the new tower and guiding Jake again. While Jake walked, the instructor for this exercise landed on the perch beside mine. Cadet Suma, how is it coming? It is going well, ma'am. Sentinel has avoided Dalabi River and made it through all other obstacles, I told her. Good. Where is he now? He is on his way to a clearing near the 7th obstacle, I told her. He is making excellent progress then. I will leave you to it, she said. Just as she was about to fly away, I thought about what Jake said. Ma'am, before you go, I have a question. Was this training ground built on ruins of some kind? Actually, yes, she confirmed. It was once the site of a city before the ravaging anyway. How did you hear about that? Sentinel told me, ma'am. He said he found something in the tunnels that went under the poison forests. I explained. What kind of something? Runes, and something called concrete. Did he know what kinds of runes? She asked. I do not think so. He has no training with runes beyond simply activating them. I see. Make sure he leaves them be. I will inform the Major of his discovery. With that, she flew off. I then contacted Jake and told him to make a mental note of where the runes he found were. Suma, I'm at the clearing, Jake said. Good. Now for the 7th obstacle. Oh, joy, he complained sarcastically. So what do I have to do this time? So far, I've climbed trees, avoided several sets of deadly plants, trudged through knee-deep mud, and navigated mysterious ruins. What fun and/or death-defying task awaits me now? Do you see the large hole to your left? I asked. He looked around for a moment, then walked over to it. Okay, I found it. Good. Now all you have to do is climb down and then back out. What? Is that it? Yes, but it is a rather deep hole, I said. I guess it's a little deep, but no more than twice my height. Is this really all I have to do? He wondered suspiciously. Yes, that is really it for this one. But do not get too comfortable, Jake, I said, and turned my gaze to the 8th obstacle. I believe this one is simply practice. Jake's POV. I sat on the edge of the pit and carefully slid down as far as I could before letting myself fall into it. I landed with a bit of a thud, but no worse than when I would jump from the halfway down the stairs to the bottom as a child. Easy, I said to myself. I looked up at the walls surrounding me and had a momentary flashback to the entrance of that cave. For just a second, I felt like I was back there again, but I shook myself out of it and started climbing my way out of the pit. I started by sending Jericho, my armor, away so I would be lighter. Getting into the pit was far easier than getting back out. I had not noticed from the outside, but the walls were smoother than I had first realized, which made finding hold for my hands and feet harder. Jake, I cannot see you from my position. How are you doing? Suma asked. Been better, I strained to say as I reached desperately for the next hold, but it was too far. Then I had an idea. Twilight, I said, summoning my hammer. It appeared in my hand and nearly caused me to lose my grip on the wall. The sudden change made me drop Twilight, and it fell with a clang to the rocks below. I sighed and resummoned it back to my hand, being careful not to drop it this time. Twilight was too heavy to maneuver with only a single arm, so I wouldn't be using my arm. I focused on what I learned from Seal and wrapped my mana around Twilight, floating it upwards above my head. I was careful to avoid the areas with runes on them that Selikar had created. I didn't want them activating. Not yet, anyway. I positioned Twilight so that it was as far upwards as it could go, but while staying within reach. Then I activated one of the runes by wrapping my mana around that area. A huge burst of air exploded from the back of Twilight and forced it into the side of the rocky wall. Bits of stone fell and landed on my shoulders, but I hardly noticed. Jake, what was that noise? Suma cried out concerned. That was the sound of a handhold being made, I told her. I looked up and saw a strange sight. The coned spike of my hammer had been thrust its entire length into the rock. The rock wall itself had a brand new crack running several feet out from the cone's entrance. Are you okay? Suma asked. I'm fine, I said, and pulled myself up Twilight's handle. From there, the rest of the climb was almost easy. Once I was out of the pit, I resummoned Twilight and inspected it for damage. It seemed fine, so I sent it away and summoned Jericho back. So, was climbing out as easy as you assumed it would be? Suma wondered. Absolutely, I lied. Good, because the 8th obstacle will not be any easier. Lorik Hezbollah's POV. Okay, Loyalty, just a bit further now. Stop when you arrive at the tree line. I told my black serpent familiar. I was one of many Neem going through the exercise with their familiars today. We were on the 4th obstacle, a mud flat created with nature magic. Loyalty was handling it well, but the mud was still slowing him down. His best environment is tall grasslands and rocky hills, though, places he can easily hide and attack. Loyalty arrived at the tree line, and I repositioned myself to another tower. To my disdain, it was the tower that Madame Suma was perched on. She did not seem to take notice of me as I landed on a perch on the opposite side of the tower. Loyalty was at the poison forest, a deadly place for most creatures, especially Neem, but not to Loyalty. He slithered easily through the obstacle and onto the next, Dalabi River. This obstacle would be too much for him to cross like he did the forest, though, so he needed to be led to the nearest safe area, a natural passageway that made the poison waters a bit safer. Upon his arrival, I realized it would be difficult for his large frame to cross such a narrow path, so I made him go slowly. Despite the water on the other side of the river being safer, he still would not be able to cross through it due to him not being able to swim. Suddenly, I heard a loud sound like thunder rumble from one of the other obstacles. Jake! What was that noise? Lady Suma shouted. Her familiar was probably doing something reckless again. I ignored her and went back to Loyalty, who had just managed to cross the river and was on his way to the sixth obstacle, an underground maze of sorts. Loyalty, go through the middle route. I ordered him, then began the Farsight ritual. It was a spell that masters could perform on their familiars who had already undergone the rite of dominance to see through their eyes. Our minds become one. Our thoughts become the same. I see what you see. I know what you know. I cast the spell and began to see through Loyalty's eyes. Suddenly, I was slithering my way through a tunnel. Vines that were hanging from the dirt ceiling quickly zoomed past. Carefully, I guided him as he turned corners and went up inclines, doing my best to keep him in a straight path. At one point, I thought I saw something carved into the walls, but his vision in darkness is less than perfect. Eventually, I helped him make his way out, and he was on to the next obstacle. Jake's POV. Well, I would definitely call this an obstacle, I said, looking up the cliffside. I stood at the bottom of a rocky and jagged cliff about 50 feet high. Or maybe an impossible task, I mumbled. Okay, Jake, just do what you did when you got out of the pit. It should be exactly the same, Suma said over our connection. Are you crazy? I nearly spat. This is nothing like the pit. If I fell off the side of the wall down there, all that I had to worry about was a bruised butt and ego. If I fall here, I'm going to die. Well, maybe you could go slowly, she suggested. Yeah, I don't think that's going to help, I said and knocked 2 fingers on the rocky face of the cliff. Do not worry, Jake. This is the last major obstacle. Once you finish this, she started to say, but I cut her off. Suma, it doesn't matter if this is the final obstacle or the key to curing cancer. I can't climb this. Hold on. I was halfway through complaining when I realized something. Suma, the point of this obstacle is to get to the top of the cliff, right? Yes, Jake, why do you ask? Do the rules specifically say I need to climb the cliff? No, not to my knowledge, she answered. Good, because that's not happening, but I might have an idea on another way up, I told her. What, like a spell, perhaps? She wondered. Yes. Now, Suma, I can use nature magic, right, even though I have inversion magic? I clarified. Of course, Jake, you know that. She answered, then asked, concerned, Why? If I can't go to the top of the mountain, I'll bring the top of the mountain to me, I suggested. In a very confused and slightly worried tone, she asked, What? Suma's POV, I watched from my perch on the observation tower as Jake used nature spell after nature spell to move incredible amounts of dirt and rock from the side of the cliff, then climb to the top of the pile and start again. Slowly, he was making his way to the top and leaving a path of destroyed rubble in his wake. He would raise his hands above his head, then clench his fists and throw them down to his side, and the rocks would break apart and fall beside him, ready to be climbed. Are you doing okay, Jake? I asked in a mixture of amazed and horrified. I'm fine, he answered, grunting with each motion. Are you sure? I asked. Yeah, I just haven't had to cast this many spells in a row before. It's more mentally tiring than I assumed it would be. He explained. I can't tell from here. How far along am I? You are about 1/4 of the way done, maybe 1/3, I said, and he climbed up his most recent pile of debris. He was panting as he spoke. It felt like more than that. Jake, you mana cannot be running out already, can it? I asked, concerned. No, I don't think so, he said, and I saw him sit down on his pile of rubble. But repeatedly climbing up all of these rocks sure has taken the wind out of me, especially after everything else I've done today. He then pulled out something from the garment he keeps on his back and placed it to his mouth. I could not see it clearly from where I was, but it looked like he was either eating or drinking. I need to take a break for a second, he said. Okay, just let me know when you are ready to continue. I'm going to fly to the next obstacle and try to get a better look at it. How many more do I have left? He wondered. Only one, I believe. With that, I took to the skies. If you love engaging stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated with all the latest episodes from FY Stories.